now we're excited to introduce tonight's panel, which features a group of inspiring women leaders. We believe that this group of women leaders serving in these positions represents the first for our legal community and for the Commonwealth, and is also unique when compared to the entire country. I am so grateful that each of them said yes when I asked them to participate, and I have stated that along with Speaker McClinton, we have this amazing panel of women represents an embarrassment of riches of women in leadership across our state. We hope that their collective record of excellence and their efforts to better the lives of others lift up generations of leaders who will come after them, and that it serves as an inspiration to all of you. Each of our panelists will be giving you a brief bio, so I will let you hear their credentials from each of their mouths. And without further ado, I am pleased to introduce Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, Debra Todd, Pennsylvania Superior Court President Judge Anne Lazarus, Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court President Judge Renee Cohn Jubelirer, Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas President Judge Nina Wright Padilla, U.S. Representative Mary Gay Scanlon, and U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, Jackie Romero. So now, to start our panel off, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and describe your personal path to leadership and the position in which you currently serve. So we'll start with Chief Justice Todd, and we'll sort of go around in a circle.
Anyway, I worked for Mr. and Mrs. Keller for every summer full-time from the time I was 12 till the time I was 18, the summer after my freshman year in college, and part-time during the school years. And I fell in love with the law. It ignited that, going into that law office and just being a part of that vibe ignited a flame that never went out for me. So I followed through on that dream. I went to Chatham College in Pittsburgh, now Chatham University, and then I went to the University of Pittsburgh Law School. Later, I got an LLM from the University of Virginia School of Law. I practiced commercial litigation for 18 years, and if you add all these years up, I'm old. And I've been on the bench, both Superior and then Supreme Court, for 25 years. In October, I was privileged to become the first female Chief Justice in 300 years. I thought it was about time.
This mic. Okay. Hi. I came through this a little bit differently, but before I start, I want to take a little privilege and congratulate Danny again. It's been... Like Danny, I had the privilege of meeting with Sandra Day O'Connor. She came here in 1993, in 2003, and in 2013 when I was awarded the Sandra Day O'Connor Award. So you are joining a very wonderful group of people, and there's no one better that we could have here. And I want to acknowledge one of my colleagues, Megan King, who's here, but much more importantly, her daughter, Liz, who is a high school senior, and she is studying the effect of 3 women on the bench who are now the leaders of the court in Pennsylvania. How prescient that she was able to do it tonight. Yes. So thank you. I am not a native-born Pennsylvanian, I hate to say. I'm from New York, from Brooklyn. So if you're from Brooklyn, raise your hands, okay? And I came to Temple Law School, where I am a proud alum, and I also got my master's of tax law at Temple. Yep. If you ever need a way to go to sleep at night, that's the way to do it. And when I was in college, and I went to the University of New York at Stony Brook, I worked for an organization that did volunteer work for some of the mental health organizations. And I had the unfortunate privilege, as you would, to work for a young man who had the last lobotomy in the United States. And I always thought that if he had had an appropriate lawyer representing him, it would not have happened. He was a little bit rambunctious. He couldn't sort of follow the rules. And I made up my mind right then and there, even though I was supposed to be pre-med, because my dad was a physician, that I was going to law school. And so I went to law school, and I became a lawyer, and I was fortunate enough to work in the Orphans Court of Philadelphia, which is a very esoteric court, as everybody knows. And while I was there, I was lucky enough to have two mentors, Judy Jamison, who was also an Orphans Court judge, and the president judge, the administrative judge of the Orphans Court, Edmund Puelik. And Judge Puelik decided that it was not good enough for me to be a lawyer. I should become the counsel to the Orphans Court. And because of that, little by little, he kept saying, "You're doing everything that a judge does. Now you have to go get political backing and you have to win. And you have to become a judge now." And that's what I did. And so because I had had 10 years of experience in the Orphans Court, I was immediately put into criminal court. And I became the coordinating judge of all the homicide and major trials of Philadelphia. And I became a member of the Philadelphia Bar Association. And I did all sorts of work there. And my mentors were incredible. But it's not enough to have mentors. You have to have a great team. And my team was my husband, who's here, who's always been my biggest fan, and who watched the children when I was campaigning, and who took care of my dad when he was sick and I was campaigning. I was always campaigning. And my mother-in-law, who helped as well, of blessed memory. And you don't get there, as Danny said, you don't get there by yourself. And I was fortunate enough to get on the Common Pleas Court bench, and I stayed there for almost 20 years. And then I ran twice for the Superior Court, so if you don't get there the first time, you have to do it once more. And I was fortunate enough this past year to be unanimously elected by my colleagues to be the President Judge of the Superior Court. I'm incredibly proud of my court. I think it's one of the most collegial courts. I said one of the most collegial courts in the state.
We're pretty darn.
I know.
So are we.
So that's my story. Your turn.
Oh, whoops. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank you, Jennifer, for inviting me to be on this panel with this very distinguished group of accomplished women. And I think Judge Dumas was planning to be here, and there she's back there. Okay, want to give her a shout out. So yes, we're so happy to have her. Happy to have her with us. Interesting story. I was originally going to go to Pitt Law School, and I would have been in the Chief Justice's class, but I was. Yes.
5 years ago.
Right, very recent. But I my husband at the time got a job in Chicago, and so we left Pennsylvania, and I went to law school at Northwestern instead. And so I didn't meet the Chief Justice until some years later. But you never know the paths that you take and where they're going to take you in one different step. And I've lived in many places around Pennsylvania and loved it all, loved the law. I said to a law student earlier, to somebody who wants to go to law school, it was like walking into a dark room and having people open blinds. And every time, there would be something new illuminated. And I still feel that way about the law. Unfortunately, many of the rooms are more illuminated these days with me after all these years of practice. But there are still those dark areas that need illumination, and it's so exciting. And then I met Danny many years ago when I was in the solicitor's office of Lehigh County, and she and Andre were litigating then. And that's the other beautiful thing about the law and careers, is meeting people. I did want to say just a little bit about my personal path to getting to the leadership role as President Judge of the Commonwealth Court, because that was centered on perseverance and resilience. It didn't happen the first time I threw my hat in the ring, or the second, or the third. But when you see someone in a leadership role, it may seem like it was easy. And we don't always hear the stories of resilience or perseverance. What is important is that I didn't give up. And when things didn't go my way, I didn't say, poor me. I didn't, get all upset and sad and, angry. But I learned from it. I reflected on what happened, and eventually, some of us take longer than others, but eventually, yes, I found what was necessary in order to win, and I kept at it until I got where I wanted to be, which is President Judge of what I think is one of the most amazing courts in the country, with both our original and appellate jurisdiction. We're trial court and appellate court in one. And I work with the most amazing people, and then with my colleagues on the appellate bench, feel very blessed.
Good afternoon. I am Nina Wright Padilla, President Judge of the... That was unexpected, thank you. My story is very similar, a little interesting. I guess we all think our lives are interesting. I don't know if you'll think so. So I'm actually originally from New York also, but I grew up in Maryland, and I ended up with an interesting childhood. My mother was Puerto Rican, and my father was Jamaican. And so they were both hardworking folks, just like the stereotypes all show you. And my mother was just extraordinary in the sense that she always made me believe I could do anything I wanted to do. Like Danielle Banks' mother, it sounds very similar. She would say, "Oh, Nina, you can do anything you want to do." And that's what started the belief that I had. And if you don't have that type of support, then you have to find it elsewhere. Look for your leaders other places and make those connections. So I had that wonderful background, which really helped me. I decided in 10th grade that I was going to go to law school. I was going to be a lawyer because I had a debate. And I had never known about a debate before, but I realized that I liked knowing things. I really liked that. I wanted to know stuff, but I wanted to know the correct things, So having to prepare for the debate helped me know things. And so I really, really appreciated that. And I also liked being correct, So I was on that pathway to law school. The only thing is I want to mention, I hate to be... talk about negative stuff, but I want to help. Maybe this will help you. Maybe this has happened to you. I had a guidance counselor in high school who just told me, well, you should go to a 2-year school, and so I went home. I didn't know. I told my mom, I said, well, I think I'm going to go to a 2-year school. That's what Mr. Gillespie said. Maybe I shouldn't say his name. Well, he's probably dead anyway. I'm sorry, no filter here, sorry. So I went home, I told my mom, and she didn't say anything to me but one statement. She said, Nina, do you want to go to Maryland or Howard? She thought I should go to HBCU because her best friend had gone there. And I said, I don't know, Maryland. So that's where I know Jen from. We both went to Maryland. And so she came on the next day with an application from the University of Maryland, College Park, which back in those days you had to fill out the application. You couldn't do it there was no online, there was no internet. And so I got admitted under early admission to University of Maryland. So, sometimes people will be naysayers in your life. They're negative people. And you have to have confidence in yourself and understand what your plan is. My husband always says to me before he goes to the gym, you have to know what your plan is before you walk in the gym. Because you get confused, you get other people have other things that they're doing. So I went to law school following that because I always knew I was going to go. And I ended up at University of Maryland because I was a resident. It was in-state status. It was cheaper, let's be honest. And so I met my husband there. He was my boyfriend at the time. You know how that is. You're off on. So we ended up getting married. And right before we got married, we took the bar. I passed it. But taking the bar thing was an interesting point because it was pivotal. I was deciding whether to take the Maryland bar or the Pennsylvania bar. So he says to me, listen, my father's a judge in Pennsylvania. Come to Pennsylvania, great things will happen. And he was right. It worked out. My father-in-law was on the Court of Common Pleas for just about 30 years, and then his last 2 years, he was on the Commonwealth Court, right before he passed away in 1994, I believe it was. So he turned out to be right, my husband, It was a good thing. So we practiced law, and we set up shop right on Chestnut Street, 1422 Chestnut Street, and 1424 Chestnut Street was Community Legal Services. You're not community. You're what were you, PLA or who's PLA? Who's CLA? Community Legal Services, 1424 Chestnut Street. So we decided, well, let's do our pro bono right now because it's so close. So we did our pro bono, and we learned bankruptcy because we were with the Consumer Bankruptcy Assistance Project, and we became supervising lawyers at that entity, and we learned how to do consumer bankruptcy, and it turned out a lot of people were filing bankruptcy back then. I suspect they still are, And the biggest joke in the book was that at the time in the office was people would come in and we'd tell them our fee, and they'd say, I can't even afford to file bankruptcy, Anyway, so my path to my judgeship was, I decided I wanted to do it. That's the message I want to get to you. You have to look to positive people. I always watched people. I watch everybody. I pay attention to what they're doing. If I have a meeting with someone, I write down what they said, not during the meeting because that's offensive, I wait until after the meeting, and then I write down notes that of what transpired. And you'd be surprised, like even now to this day, there are notes I have from meetings I had with people. If anyone here met with me, yes, I have notes from our meetings. And you can use them in the future to connect different dots. You have no idea how that thing comes into play. So it was really, really important. That's one of the things I would suggest also. So I got involved in politics, and there's no way to explain that. There's no rhyme or reason to it, but you have to do it, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania to be on the trial court level. That's what you have. That's the dirty secret. I'm sure any of the folks up here could talk to you about that privately, not publicly. And so I ended up, I ran for judge. I was lucky enough to get a lot of support, and I won. And I've been on the bench. This is my 20th year, I believe. My 20th year, which is crazy. I feel like just yesterday. It's amazing. And the last thing I want to point out is my PJ election. And I ran with Lori, Judge Dumas, Commonwealth Court. We ran together. Anybody else in here run with me? No? I say that because I was giving a talk recently, and like 3 people came up. I ran with you too, Nina. So I don't want to offend anyone, but Judge Dumas and I also ran together, and then she elevated to the Commonwealth Court. Congratulations, Judge. So I was fortunate enough to win President Judge. I got a majority of votes from my colleagues, and I'm very grateful to them for voting for me. I hope they have confidence in me. It's a wonderful achievement. There are 93 judges on the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas, and everyone has their own mindset. And every morning when I walk into the office, I'm reminded that everyone has their own mindset. But I love my colleagues. I love being a judge. I love what I'm doing. I love corresponding with everyone, and I love being asked to go to these events. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming out today. This is great. You know, one observation I had straight off the bat is when we have more women in leadership, we will have shorter podiums. Okay? One of my colleagues has taught us all. We now keep a little step stool in the car, especially when we're with Senator Fetterman. So I'm Mary Gay Scanlon. I'm one of 3 members of Congress representing Philadelphia. I'm the only one who has part of the suburbs. And since the lines changed just last year again, I represent all of Delaware County. I represent Philadelphia. Thank you, Delco in the house. Yes, I represent Philadelphia kind of below Oregon Ave, but so that's the shipyard, the Navy Yard, all of the sports stadiums, the port, the airport, so a lot of good jobs, which I very much appreciate. And then I have part of Montgomery County as well, so Norristown, Bridgeport, parts of Ardmore and Lower Merion, and Narberth. So it's a very socioeconomically diverse district, which my staff has figured out that it's one of the most diverse districts in the country that way. 1/5 of the people in the district claim Irish descent, not just on St. Patrick's Day. Over 1/4 of the district is black. We have 11% foreign born, so it's a really, really interesting place to be. I can't say that I ever set out to become a member of Congress. It's been more of an anger management problem. But I did always want to be a lawyer. I came from a family of lawyers, although I was the first female lawyer. But my grandfather on my mother's side was one of the first juvenile court judges in New York. He helped write the juvenile code in New York back in the 60s. My father's father was a small town judge. My father was a judge. He eventually became a U.S. magistrate judge. So the law was always around. Lots of uncles who were also in the law. But it just always appealed, and it was something I wanted to do from a time I was very small. I also wanted to get out of Watertown, New York, which is a small town in upstate New York with more cows than people. So I went to Colgate and then decided I needed even more city. And so I was thrilled when I got into Penn and went to law school. Here. So went to law school, clerked on the Superior Court, and then learned how to try cases with some people in this room, did some trial work. And then kind of found where I was meant to be, which was in the public interest section. The public interest sector, I worked at the Education Law Center. I was on the board of CLS Support Center, did a lot of bar work, and truly the Philadelphia Bar, we heard earlier how it is just one of the premier bar associations in the country. Its public interest work is beyond anything. I mean, so many groundbreaking decisions have come out of this area, so many novel projects. It really has been an amazing part of what I've been able to do in my career and what I still do, because I am actually, I think CLS has a hotline to my office. Whenever a new reg comes down and it's causing havoc, they're like, you need to do this. It's like, okay, fine. But so many really amazing people in this bar and in this public interest community who've been able to help inform the work that I've done. While I was working at the Education Law Center, the Kool-Aid that they served there was that all parents should be involved in their local school district. So that was my first electoral challenge. I did run for school board, and I served a couple terms on our school board out in Delaware County, and thought I was done. Started doing a little bit of fundraising to get more women elected in Pennsylvania's legislature. Because at the time, I think we had less than 18% women in the Pennsylvania legislature. Afghanistan had a higher percentage of women in its legislature, and I found that just shocking. But what I hadn't really looked at was the fact that we had no women representing Pennsylvania in Congress. So when I got elected 5.5 years ago, we had 18 male members of Congress and 2 male senators. So for 2 weeks, I got to be the only woman representing Pennsylvania in Congress. There had been 7 women in the past. Most of them were widows of people who expired in office. The most recent had been Allison Schwartz from Montgomery County. But we were the largest delegation with no women representing us in Congress. We gratefully gave Maryland that honor, but they're about to break it too. So 2 weeks later, I was joined by Susan Wild, who also won a special election up in Lehigh County. And then in January, we were joined by Madeline Dean and Chrissy Houlihan. And then 2 years ago by Summer Lee from the Pittsburgh area. We may pick up a couple more this year. We hope we pick up a couple more this year. But so it's been an interesting career, having gone to a college that had just gone co-ed a few years before I got there, then starting in the legal profession when, Terry may remember, when I had a client ask if they let girls write briefs. I told them that we write them, we don't wear them. But, you know, and you had to joke your way out of everything. That's okay. So it has been interesting to kind of keep carving out space. Congress right now is about 27% women, much more so on one side of the aisle than the other. But just everything that I learned in years of working. Oh, and the other thing is pro bono work is a great way to end up in Congress if you want to do that, because every issue comes through. I never thought that would be great training, but doing pro bono work for a large national law firm, I got to work on immigration cases and voting protection and all kinds of poverty law issues. So it all kind of has come full circle and has really been amazing. The one regret I have, although not really, is that clearly those who ran for judge were a lot smarter because they only have to run every 10 years. And we're up every 2, and there are no campaign finance limits in Pennsylvania, and there is in the House. So, you know, those are the only regrets. But there we go. But I do think the relationships built through this community have just been invaluable throughout. So, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Romero, United States Attorney, and quite honestly, I have no idea how I got here. In the over 230 years that the U.S. Attorney slot has existed here in Philadelphia, there's never been a woman, there's never been a Latina, there's certainly never been an openly gay U.S. attorney, so I'm it. And when I say I have no idea how I got here, my grandfather came to this country as an immigrant, and he literally had nothing. He had like some change in his pocket and the name of a boarding house where some friends of his from his hometown were living in New Jersey. And he just had a lot of grit. I can't imagine 16 years old, alone, without family, coming here and relying on your hands and your wit and anything you can figure out, didn't even know the language. And he got jobs as a laborer. In fact, all my grandparents were laborers. There were no lawyers. This was not, I don't know where I came up with this idea to become a lawyer, much less the U.S. attorney, because no one in my family was doing that sort of thing. My grandfather saved up his money and bought a piece of land where he built with his own hands a little bodega on the side of the road so that he could service the other workers that he had worked with. They needed newspapers and gum and all those kinds of things. And eventually, when diners came in style, he built a New Jersey diner. And that's where I grew up. That was the family business. So when I tell you I really had no role models within family for the roadmap that I needed ahead of me, I really mean that. My role models were people I desperately sought out and who were very generous of their time and their resources. I being in the diner would hear lawyers talking about cases, and I thought that's so cool. I would read newspaper articles about cases, and I thought, wow, the law is amazing. You'd read about the legislature and what they were doing with laws. And that was the stuff that I just knew I had a passion for. I had no idea how I was going to even get to college, so I got straight A's. And I was able to get to college on scholarship money. And there, again, I sought out mentors, folks who were in the administration, deans, anybody would listen to me, quite frankly, and answer my questions. How do I get to law school? I don't understand this thing called the LSAT that you got to study for, and where am I going to find the money for law school? I asked a lot of questions, and you'd be surprised at the mentors that show up in your life, some of whom look nothing like me, you know. There was an older white woman who came from great privilege, was a dean in our college, who took me under her wing. She saw something in me and fostered it, you know. And throughout my life, there have been people like that who just miraculously showed up. Sure, I showed up with some gumption, and, you know, I had the grades and I was working hard, but people were very generous. I went to Rutgers Law School, and I got to give a shout out to Rutgers, because their minority law student program was just a saving grace for me. There were students in that program like me who had come from immigrant backgrounds, who were figuring it out for the first time. And I had an instant family going to Rutgers, and secured internships and things like that through the programs that they have set up. Quite frankly, it was really a saving grace. I met my law firm, and we fell in love through the minority student program. My first year summer, because I had one of the top grades, I was chosen to interview with Lowenstein Sandler in New Jersey. And it was love at first sight. I started there, and they gave me a mentor who was like me. Virginia Lazala was another Latina who was a senior level associate in the firm doing incredible work, and she took me under her wing. And I had a great time there, but I knew personally for me, I wanted other things. I wanted to work for the Department of Justice. So I used my time wisely. I did a lot of pro bono work. I got in court by doing that sort of thing, and making a name for myself. And 2 years out of law school, the Department of Justice in Washington hired me because of the work that I was able to do at Lowenstein. I started in commercial litigation down in DC at Main Justice. I jumped from there over to the Treasury Department and was assigned as a senior litigator with the United States Mint. They had a lot of litigation that they needed somebody who was a seasoned litigator to come in and deal with. And then from the Mint, the job opening came here in Philadelphia at the U.S. Attorney's Office. This was home for me in a lot of ways. I grew up in New Jersey. I went to school in South Jersey, and Philadelphia was kind of my stomping grounds. Got me closer to home. Most of my family still lives in New Jersey. And I was able to start here in 2006. I've been with the office 18 years, which is a unique thing. Most U.S. attorneys are not people who came from within. And I think it gave me a leg up in a lot of ways in terms of the work that needed to be done in the office. We are facing budget cuts of 11%. Sorry, Congresswoman, but you know, we could use some help. But you know, I was able to double the size of our violent crimes unit despite those cuts, just using my old school smarts, the way I grew up. You know, we don't need a lot of money to do a lot of work. I've partnered with DA's offices and with the AG's office here in Pennsylvania. They have grant money for violent crime, and they have given us special assistant U.S. attorneys who now sit in my office in my violent crime unit. And we're just doing amazing work with carjackings and all sorts of other things on very little money. And so I do think my upbringing and the grit and everything that I bring to the job has been a benefit and has helped me in being the top of a very large organization. I have over 300 employees. I preside over, federal agencies in 9 counties. I meet regularly with DEA, FBI, ATF, Homeland Security, you name it, and I have to set priorities for the 9 counties. Where do we need to be? What do we need to be doing? And it has been a pleasure, and I think coming from very little and coming from the background that I come from, I know what collaboration is, I know what partnership is, and I know how to get a job done with very little money. We've doubled the size of our Allentown office, done construction up there, built that up so it's a true office, and we're just doing more work and more work each day with very little. So very excited to be here and just very excited to be your U.S. Attorney. So thank you.
So we are running short on time, but I do want to ask each of you to answer very briefly 2 questions. I'm going to start on this end. I'm going to start with the federal side of things. So we've talked about how historic it is having so many women in leadership across the state. But I want to hear from the federal perspective as well as the state perspective how the women's perspective in leadership you think is impacting policy, impacting your respective offices. And then at the end, I'd like each of you to just give a 30-second piece of advice, particularly to the young lawyers and the law students who are here today. So we'll start down here with Jack.
Well, I'm very lucky to work for an attorney general who has made women's issues front and center in terms of the money that he has poured into our Indian country communities to combat the extensive violence that we're seeing against indigenous women, the money that he's putting into gun crimes, particularly domestic violence, where guns are involved. He has really taken a stance that no attorney general prior to him has, and so I appreciate that. He's made our issues front and center. In terms of being a woman and how that adds to leadership, look, we've all read the studies in terms of what women bring to CEO level jobs. In terms of collaboration is one of the big things. Check, I do that, and my special agents in charge and our chiefs of police will all tell you that they've never had this level of collaboration and communication with prior U.S. attorneys. It's just something that I bring to the picture. Let's sit down and hash this out, folks, and let's come up with a plan and real solutions, right? Women are, they say, a little bit more innovative. We embrace technology. We'll take risks, and like I said, in terms of building out my units and doing innovative things, check, I'm doing those sorts of things as well. Women are great developers of talent, developers of their people. We really look within and we say, what's working, what's not working, and how do I lift people up? Certainly, I'm doing all those things with the office. So those are just a handful that come to mind, but I think as women leaders, we do bring a different perspective and a different approach to the jobs that we all have. So.
I think I have to echo a lot of that. Both serving on our school board and now in Congress, there are a couple things that have really stood out to me about when you have more women in a legislature, for example, and there's some great data from the Center for American Women in Politics, which is at Rutgers. Whether it's nature or nurture, I've seen in both settings that as you have more women in a legislative body, they look at different issues. So I joined a school board that was 2 women and 7 men, and all of the conversations were about construction and taxes. Okay, and for whatever reason, as we got more women on the board, more of them had spent time in the classroom. They had greater concerns about nutrition and childhood development and that kind of thing, and we ended up addressing different issues. Similarly, in Congress, When I joined in 2018, it was the largest class of women in Congress's history, and we now have a Black Maternal Health Caucus trying to address some of the issues of maternal health, which greatly impact this area, but impact the whole country, and our national record is just a complete travesty. So we end up with more women in office, we address those issues more. The second part is not just the different issues. Oh, we also got a expanded child tax credit with a lot of female leadership. But the other thing is decision making and how you get from point A to point B. And what I've seen is less zero-sum game. Less this is a contest or this is a game, and more how do I get from here to there? I don't care whose name is on the bill. You know, let's just get this done, and maybe we all win, as opposed to someone winning and someone losing, and that's been a big thing. I did want to point out that one of the few things working in Congress these days are the appropriations budget bills, because they have to get done. But until recently, it was 2 women in the Senate and 2 women in the House leading those efforts, and just grinding out this massive legislation every year. Again, because of those attributes, I think, how do we get from point A to point B and get the job done? So I think that's important. And finally, because if we're talking about women's issues, there is a big issue. The 2nd anniversary of the Dobbs decision is on Monday. That is something that growing up was very bipartisan. All of the Planned Parenthood in my hometown was run by all the Republican ladies. Now there is a big partisan divide about these issues, and I'm not quite sure how we get past that, but we're just going to keep fighting to protect women's freedom to choose, including with a bill we are dropping tomorrow morning to repeal the Comstock Act. So that's that.
Thank you so much. These are wonderful comments. With respect to how women have changed, what's going on in the courts, that's specifically what I'll address. And then I have some comments about tips that I want to go over also. But with respect to the courts, I mean, if you think about it, the Philadelphia courts have been around for about 400 years-ish. And during that time, it's only been since about 2000 or so, maybe in 1997, 98, when Freddie Messiah Jackson became the first female person of color to be president judge. I mean, that's really recent. Up until before this, I guess the 1600s, it's always been white men. So we didn't get diversity until around that time. So since then, we've had a lot of diverse president judges, which is important. It does give different perspectives. I won't keep repeating what my former speakers have said, but it's really important to have diversity. And one of the things I wanted to talk about also is, if you don't have diversity around you, then you be the one to start it. We have a DEI person in the courts, and one of the things he does is make up these little videos that are really engaging and important. And diversity is important among every level, not just people of color, but also the LGBTQ plus community. That's important. People of color, that's important. Women, that's important. All kinds of diversity. It is important to recognize that and identify it. And unless you have people in these spots, it's hard for that to happen. So I wanted to talk about that. And the other thing I want to say, and this is going to seem kind of unrelated to anything, but these are just last things that I want to say, tips that I want to give you that I think are important. I feel like, with respect to women in general, try not to be self-effacing. You know, women throw shade on themselves sometimes. Let the sun shine on you. Don't make jokes against yourself. If you make a joke, keep it something neutral. Don't cut yourself down in a joke. I think that's important. That's part of leadership too. Also, when you walk in a room, take notice of what's happening in the room. Gender, race, age, all that. Be aware, be informed, and be prepared for an occasion. Write it down. Write down what you're going to say. I think every speaker here things written down. That's really important. Get your thoughts together. Even if you have a doctor's appointment, write down what you're going to ask the doctors. You know, doctors often go on these soliloquies and then you forget, you know. So write down. No, and I'm not trying to throw shade on the doctors. That's important. But you know, write down everything you want to ask the doctor. So be prepared. Try not to just talk on the fly all the time. Listen to others, and I want to stress, listen to what other people are saying. That's part of our I think our journey that we all have to learn about. Listening to other people and try to address those concerns, follow up with them, and doing that alone will help with your own credibility and with your reliability. It really will. Be honest. If you can't help, say so. Make decisions and forgive yourself for making the wrong decision. I make the wrong decisions every day. I make mistakes every day. Forgive yourself. I'm still working on that. I'm a work in progress on that. Challenge the norms. Talk about bias when appropriate. Raise the issue. Not all the time, because it's not always appropriate. And I also wanted to say, believe in yourself. Believe that you can succeed. Just believe that. If you believe that, it'll happen. And finally, know when to end the conversation. You know, sometimes you gotta go, okay?
Thanks, Jen. There was somebody I wanted to introduce that I neglected to mention earlier when we talk about women who have accomplished so much. We have a general counsel to our Supreme Court, and she's here today, Teresa Sachs. And if you think you have a hard job, imagine trying to advise 7 Supreme Court justices who all have different views on things, and she does it beautifully through we call it the free flow of ideas, right? I wanted to mention with respect to women in leadership, it's not just that we now have women in leadership of the 3 appellate courts. And I apologize to the men in the audience because I love y'all. But this program is about women, and women have basically taken over the Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court. Of the 14 commission judges on the Superior Court, 12 are women. Of the nine commission judges on the Commonwealth Court, 7 are women. So we've got something going on here. It's a good thing, I think. There are 2 basic types of leaders that I've observed over the years. One is a command and control leader, and in our chief justices, we've had those types of leaders. Command and control is kind of a military concept, and it's very individualized in what's right, and then you do it. I know what's right, and you follow. And then there is the more collaborative, consensus-building type of leadership, and that's what I try to do. And I can't say I'm always successful at it, but I certainly listen to everyone, and I try, when at all possible, to form a consensus. And I think that's a quality that many women exhibit, and may be one of the signatures of our leadership abilities. Now, this is the most important part for me. The young lawyers and the law students, the young women in the audience, many years ago, when I chose to enter the legal profession, it was a man's world. I'm talking over 40 years ago. Thankfully, that has changed, and women, together with men, are law firm partners, general counsel, judges, and Supreme Court justices. This is not news to any of you, but I wanted to point out that in striving for success as a young woman, there is no reason to be anything other than what you are and who you are in order to make it in what is, admittedly, a tough profession where assertiveness and tenacity reign supreme. You can be tough without being a bully. You can be kind without being weak. There was a book published several years ago entitled, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. Well, as the first female Chief Justice of Pennsylvania, I'm here to tell you, nice girls do get the corner office.
How do you follow that?
That's my mic drop.
You know, many years ago, during the confirmation hearings of Justice Sotomayor, she made a comment, and I paraphrase it very often, and she said, a wise Latina woman brings a different perspective, and it will be a valuable perspective on the court. And I think women do bring a different perspective to the court. I don't know that we're more collaborative, but I do think that we are more willing to exchange views. I think that we are more willing to listen to the other side, or just to listen at what is important to the people in the office. And I think that being a leader is to suppress the fact that you might know better than some of the others, but you need to let them know themselves and come to that consensus. It makes for a better team. For the young women that are out there, I would say, you know, when I was a young lawyer, it was a very big deal to wear a suit to the office. And as women, particularly when you were pregnant, if you were allowed to go to court at all, the kinds of suits that were available were not exactly what you would think you might want to do in front of a jury. And I refused to do that. I refused to wear those little ties that sort of looked like, you know, but they weren't really, they were sort of bows, but not really. And I
wore them every day.
Those of us from New York, we just didn't do that. And I remember a judge saying to me, "You're not wearing a suit today." I said, "No, I'm wearing a dress." And I think part of that is you have to be yourself. You have to be true to yourself. You have to understand that in the law, there's no one right answer. There are lots of different roads and lots of different styles, and you can do things a lot of different ways as long as you follow the law and you have an understanding of what the law should be and what the law is. And as long as you are ethical, and as long as you try hard, and as long as you are super prepared, you will do well. And there's no substitute for being over-prepared. There just isn't. And so I would say to every young lawyer, but particularly young women have to be more prepared. And someday maybe we won't have to be as prepared. But now you have to be so prepared, more prepared, better and better. That doesn't mean you have to do it all. So, enjoy.
And mindful that I think I'm the one standing between us and you and the reception, I will try to be brief. And it's interesting to hear some of what my colleagues have said here. I do think that having more women in the courts and in leadership positions has created an environment more conducive to allowing us to bring our authentic selves into the workplace. For context, earlier in my career, as was common for women at the time, I was advised not to smile and not to stand out. And so for many years, I wore dark suits and tried not to smile. And if you know me, you know how tough that was. It was isolating. So what have I learned? It is not a problem to smile, to empathize, to listen, to stand out. It is a problem not to. And with more women leaders and diverse leaders, people can be their authentic selves and be taken seriously. And with more women in leadership roles and with more diverse leaders, people can picture themselves doing the same. The added beauty of this, as you've heard before, and I can't emphasize it enough, is that as we rise, we can, and I believe we have the obligation to, lift each other up. So my advice in 30 seconds or less, other than, I hope you were taking notes. I was. I mean, that's another thing. Always have something near you. You can use your app on your phone, too. When you hear good nuggets, and as, although, yikes, Nina, I'm going to have to look at what I've said that you've got in your notes there. But it's always good to take notes. But, believe in yourself. Don't be afraid to take risks and fail. When things don't go well, and they will often go well, but they won't always go well. Recover, reflect, retool, and retry. To quote the lady, thank you. Final quote from the Iron Lady Margaret Thatcher. You may have to fight a battle more than once to win it, but win it you will.
So thank you to our remarkable women leaders for this wonderful conversation. You have all truly been mentors to me, and you have always provided me with powerful inspiration, as I'm sure you've done with everyone here tonight. So thank you again to our fabulous panel. We are so grateful to have all of you here tonight.